Hi everyone, Mr. Aldali Srinivasappa. Welcome you all for today's session. In this session, we will discuss about the causes of failure of heating elements, and also we will have a deep discussion regarding the induction heating and its types. So let's begin the session. The heating element will get failure because of few reasons. So here let's see what are those causes for failure of heating elements. The very most important thing is the formation of hotspot. Hotspots are nothing but these are few points in the heating element which are at a higher temperature compared to the other part of the element. So if you consider any steel rod, at one particular point there will be temperature will be high compared to the other part. That is called hotspot. In the steel rod there will be one portion where we get the very high temperature, and that spot is named as hotspot. Now question comes, why it happens, means what is the reason behind this hotspot. So there let's see the reasons of the hotspot, the formation of hotspot. So the very first reason for forming the hotspot is high rate of local oxidation. In short, we can call it as a local oxidation is the reason for hotspot. So what actually the local oxidation? Just look into this picture. Here this is the element, and in which you can observe this black hole here, and this is a hot spot. This is because of the local oxidation. Local oxidation is nothing but the cross section of the metal at that particular point, at that hot spot where hot spot is created, or where oxidation is more, or where oxidation is more. Oxidation is nothing but where it is chemically reacted. So it loses its property and the area is going to increase. Because of the increase in area, resistance will the area will be decreased. Because of decrease in area, resistance will increase, and because of that the temperature will also increase at that particular spot, right? So local oxidation means it is just getting chemically affected with the some other natural oxygen or a gas. Okay, so at that point you will get a high temperature. This is one reason why the R spot is presented. Then the second point, we can understand that shielding of the element. So this shielding is nothing but it will reduce the local heat loss by radiation, and means the heat which is liberated through radiation, that will be blocked by the shielding. Shielding means it is going to provide a protection for the system, for the heating element. So it is just blocking the surrounding area. So if it is blocked, then heat cannot be transferred through radiation. If heat is not transferred through radiation at that particular portion where it is blocked, there the temperature will be increased. That is the other reason of formation of heat. The third reason is the causes, means we can say that if there is no support, if there is no sufficient support for an element, it may cause sagging and wrapping. It may cause sagging and wrapping. We need to have a proper support for the material. If there is no proper support, we get this sagging and wrapping in the system, and that may create uneven spacing between the various section of elements, which may cause the hot spot. So these are few reasons which are creating a hot spot in the element. The formation of these hot spots may be prevented by maintaining uniform and homogeneous material throughout its length. You should have a uniform and homogeneous material throughout its length, and also by using minimum number of supports, right? So if you have minimum number of supports without any sagging, so that's most important. We should not have a sagging of an element. So this is about all the concept of first reason, that is formation of hot spot. So now let's see what may be the second reason. So the second reason for cause failure of a heating element is oxidation and intermittency of operation. So oxidation and intermittency of operation. So when the heating element attains high temperature, definitely when heating element is working on a high temperature, an oxide scale is formed on the surface of the element. So if you have an heating element, that heating element will form the oxide scale or oxide layer on the surface of the element. This is caused only because of the high temperature, when it is working at a high temperature. That's why even you can recall one point here, we include iron with a nichrome. If you include iron with a nichrome, then that will get affected oxidized earlier at 900 degrees Celsius only. So when we increase the temperature, oxidation effect comes into picture, and that creates a layers on the surface of the element. Due to frequent use of these elements, this layer or oxide scale is subject to a stress, that is a thermal stress, heat stress will be there. Due to frequent heating and cooling, it cracks and also flakes off. So that is how the breakdown will occur. So operating an element at high temperature at a constant duration for a constant or a long time, there will be a creation of an oxide scale on the element that may break or crack. Okay, this exposes fresh metal to oxidation further. If cracks occurs, that will oxidize the element further, and that results in the hot spot, which again results in the breakdown. Right. So these are the important points of oxidation. So this is how it looks. So the metal will be there. You can look at the picture. There is a metal, and when we give a low temperature, the percentage of oxide is very less. Oxidation is very less. When we operate it at high temperature, then oxidation is very high, and look at this. It is going in depth. So it is going in depth. At certain point, it will just break completely. The metal will be completely broke. So that is the concept of oxidation. Even you can look at this picture. This is how it looks once it is oxidized. Okay, I hope this is clear for you. Now let's have a look over the another condition because of which the breakdown occurs, that is contamination and corrosion. So contamination is nothing but it's an action of making impure by polluting or poisoning the element. Right. So you can have a look over this. This is a steel, and it is this portion is different because of the contamination and because of making it impure. So let me know what actually it is. The gases and oil fumes liberated inside the chamber. So inside the chamber, whatever the gas or a fume we have, that inside the chamber due to heating will communicate, that will contaminate the heating elements and produce dry corrosion. It looks like this. Okay, due to which there will be a hot spot, and again that will cause us a breakdown. So whatever the gas liberated inside the chamber because of heating of a flux or lubricants, that will contaminate the heating of the heating element. So that causes the hot spot. So these are some of the important reasons why there is a breakdown in the heating element or causes of failure of heating element. So I hope this is clear for you. Now let's move on for the another concept. Let us understand about the losses in the heating elements and also try to get the efficiency here. So the heating element will have losses. Let's understand what are those various losses available in the resistance O1. So we are talking about the resistance heating. So I will take an example of a resistance O1. So in a resistance O1, what may be the losses? Similar, you can also compare it with the resistance furnace also. So let's look at the first point. The heat is going to be lost in raising the temperature from 0 to its required temperature, or raising the temperature of the oven to the working temperature. Generally, when it means that, let's understand this concept now. When we switch on the resistance oven, the temperature of the oven will be 0, or it will be at a room temperature. You can assume that it's at room temperature. It will be at a room temperature, but we want something more than that. Say I want to increase the temperature up to 500 degrees Celsius, right? So when you want 500 degrees Celsius, so that is working temperature. So increasing the temperature of a oven from room temperature to working temperature, we need to apply the means. For that we are applying the old supply. You are giving the supply, and it is taking time to reach that 500 degrees Celsius. So unless and it reaches the 500 degrees Celsius or a working temperature, that oven is not going to heat up the element whatever we have in that. So it is just waiting. The oven is just waiting, and it is just what we can say, it is just consuming the supply to get its working temperature. So till it reaches the working temperature, it is just consuming. So that is a loss. That heat in between what room temperature to 500 degrees Celsius, whatever it is increasing, it is just a loss. It is not used in the element properly, right? it is not used by the element properly. So we call that the temperature or the input whatever we are giving to raise the temperature from room temperature to working temperature is a loss, and it can be given like this. Weight of oven, it depends upon, means what is the input we are giving, that depends upon weight of the oven, that will be in kg, into specific heat, that nothing but specific heat is nothing but joules per kg per degree Celsius, right? How much of heat is liberated per kg of that material and also per degree Celsius. And then rise in temperature in degree Celsius, how that temperature is increasing, how much of temperature is increasing in degree Celsius. So based on these three parameters we can mention the loss, that is heat 1. So finally we can mention it like this, H1, that is heat loss 1 because of temperature. We can say that m is nothing but mass of the oven, that is weight. S is nothing but specific heat. T1 minus T2 means from room temperature to working temperature, the difference, that is the rise in temperature. How much of temperature you need to reach, that difference will give you the total losses over there, and that will be in terms of watt seconds or joules. I hope this is clear, right? Now let's have the look over the second kind of a loss. Let's look into this. This is again something like that. It is lost in raising the temperature of the containers which are required to be heated every time the furnace is charged. Means there will be a container in a oven, that container should get heated up now. So after heating of the container only the element will get heat. So the container should get heated up, and the loss, we are going to lose some temperature over there, right? The loss in raising the temperature of the containers. Containers will be at room temperature, again that has to be increased. First we need to increase the oven temperature, and then the container will also get increased its temperature. So the power consumed for that is also wasted. So that can be given as weight of the container. It depends upon the container's weight, its heat, specific heat, and raising temperature, as similar as this one, right? Now the third loss is, okay, now container is also heated up. After that it will reaches the element, and the furnace's walls will also get heated. The loss of heat through the furnace walls, there will be continuous flow of heat through the wall, that is loss, that is not required. The walls of furnace is heated unnecessarily, so that is a loss, and that can be given as Ka by T into T1 minus T2. K is nothing but the thermal conductivity of the walls, A is nothing but the area of the wall, T is nothing but the thickness, and T1, T2 are nothing but the temperature. Then the fourth loss is loss of heat due to opening of the door. Frequently we do this, we will just open the door, we will close the door. So during that some heat is coming out of the oven, that is waste. So that can also be considered as the fourth loss and named as H4. So totally the total loss will be H1 plus H2 plus H3 plus H4. Now if we talk about the efficiency is nothing but, so here we considered H. If H is the heat required to raise the temperature of the charge to, that is the required heat, then the efficiency can be given as like this. So H is what we require, means H is the actual output. Efficiency means we know that output by input, isn't it? Output by input, or it can be given as output by output plus losses, right? Plus losses. So what are the losses we have? Output is H. Output is H, that is the heat required at the end of by the charge, divided by this H, same H here, H plus losses. So what are the losses? H1, H2, H3, H4. These are the losses. So this is how we can give the efficiency of a heating element, right? Now let's move on for the another concept which is most important type of an heating. So this is another type of an heating, electrical heating, that is induction heating. Till now we have discussed about the resistance heating. Now let's look at this induction heating. So as the name indicates, as the name itself indicates, in this type of heating, heat is produced in the charge by the currents induced in it due to electromagnetic induction. So the current will be produced due to electromagnetic induction, and because of that heat will be produced in the charge or the element. So that's the reason why it is named as an induction heating. The induction heating is based on the principle of a transformer. Based on the principle of transformer is nothing but based on the Faraday's principle of mutual induction. So there will be a primary winding for which the AC supply will be given, and the charge will be acting as a secondary winding. So whenever the supply is given for primary winding, a voltage is induced in the secondary charge, due to which current circulates in the charge and heats it up. So this is how the process will be. The heat produced in the charge can be given as H is proportional to V square by R. So this is the heat produced. So you can say that the heat produced in the charge due to induction effect will be proportional to the voltage, square of the voltage, and inversely proportional to the resistance. Right. So for sufficient heat of heating of a heating or melting of a charge, we need the resistance of the charge must be low. The resistance must be low so that we can get very high heat, and this is possible in the metals. If we consider any metal, its resistance will be low. So that's a good point. And the voltage must be high. So we should have very high voltage. To get this high voltage, we need to have a very high flux and high frequency. So to get higher flux, we can get it using magnetic materials. We can get the higher flux using magnetic materials. Therefore, we can say that magnetic materials can be easily heated by induction heating. So this is the point you should understand here. You should note down. Magnetic materials can be easily heated by the induction heating. Right? Because when we go for we are using a magnetical concept here. And then non-magnetic materials, compared to the non-magnetic materials, magnetic materials can be heated up easily. Right? So low frequency induction furnaces are used for melting and refining of metals. Now let's see what are the types of these induction furnaces we have. Types of induction heating are basically classified into two. Among that, the first one is core type or low frequency types of induction furnace. We will have a core type induction furnace, or it's also called as low frequency because we apply the very low frequency at this type of a furnaces. And there in that we have three further classifications: direct core type, vertical core type, and indirect core type of furnaces. So let's have a look about this one by one. Before that, let's see what is the second type of an induction furnace, that is coreless type. So we had a core and now it is coreless type or high frequency induction furnace. So when you go for a high frequency, then we no need to have a core. So that's why it is called coreless type of a furnace. By this point of at this point you might have clearly understood that it's going to work on the mutual induction concept. That's why we use the term called core. Now let's have a look over these types. In core type, let's have a first thing, that is direct core type. So direct core type of induction furnace, it works on the principle of mutual induction effect, that is transformer principle, right? And also the charge which is to be heated, it is going to form secondary. As I told you already, charge will be secondary and the primary winding will be given supply, right? So the let's look at the picture. Look at this. The primary winding supply is given to the primary winding here. So this is the primary winding. Supply will be given to the primary winding, and because of this core, there is a core here, and we have this is what the secondary arrangement we can have. Here we get a crucible form of insulating material. So this is an insulating material. This circular hearth is called as an insulating. This is made up of an insulating material. It will be continuously, means it will be there from this end to this end. There will be a flow, continuity. So this is a container. This is made up of an insulating material, and this is in the form of crucible shape. So it is called crucible insulating material. It contains the charge which is to be heated. So there will be a charge. So this charge is going to behave like a short circuited secondary winding. It will behave like a single turn short circuited secondary winding. Whenever the supply is given in the primary, the current will be flows through the secondary, that is charge, and then it get heated up. So this is the concept. This is the principle of direct core type of a heating, right? So definitely there are some advantages and disadvantages which you need to understand about this type of an heating, right? So let's look at the disadvantages first, because definitely this is going to have, means we have supply here, current has to pass this core and it has to flow through the charge. So in between it has to pass through this, right? So there is a lot of problem or lot of path it has to travel. So there will be a definitely a loss. So let's look into that. There will be a high leakage reactance, chance of leakage of flux. If flux leakage is high, then current reaching at the secondary will be less. So when leakage is high, then definitely the power factor what we are going to get will be poor. The power factor is poor. This is because of the poor magnetic coupling between the primary and secondary circuit. So as I shown in the picture, primary and secondary, we have a lot of gap between the primary and secondary. Because of this, means we in technical words we call it as a magnetic coupling is not good. So due to this, there will be a poor power factor, right? So this difficulty means we have to overcome this. Anyhow, we need to overcome this difficulty. To overcome this, what we need to do is we have to apply a low frequency supply. Low frequency means it will be in the order of 10 hertz. The operating frequency of this kind of heating system should be of 10 hertz, right? So for 10 hertz up to low frequency, when you use for it low frequency, then definitely we can have very less leakage reactance and we can try to improve the power factor, right? So that is a disadvantage, means we can apply it for only low frequency, not for high frequency. And also to generate the 10 hertz, that 10 hertz frequency, to obtain the 10 hertz frequency, we need a separate motor generator set, because generally whatever the supply we are getting, that is of 50 hertz, but I want 10 hertz, means we need to have a separate motor generator set, which again creates a extra cost. This is the major drawback of this kind of a system. And normal frequency, when we apply, if I apply 50 hertz, then a large current flowing through the charge will create electromagnetic forces, and it set up its own charge, right? So which causes the turbulence, means it will melt, turbulence of the molten charge will be caused. So to maintain the turbulence, we need to reduce the frequency. So it cannot be operated at a high frequency. If the current density, means the current flowing in a charge per meter square, current density, if it exceeds 5 amps, it is not mentioned here, so you should understand it is 5 amps, means the current density should not exceed 5 amps per millimeter square. The density means per unit square, right? So if it is exceeding this, then there will be a chance of getting bubbles and voids in the charge. If you get a bubbles in the charge, then the current will pass through that, it will not pass through the charge, right? So current may not flow through the charge. This effect is called pinch effect. So pinch effect means it is possible to have a separate layer on the charge. On the charge you will have bubbles and current passes through that bubbles. Then the charge will not get at all. The charge will not get current at all. So heat will not be developed in the charge. That is a problem, right? So that effect is called pinch effect. To complete this, means if there is a pinch effect is going on, to complete the circuit, means it is not passing through this charge, but if you want to make it to pass through the charge, then what you need to do is, to complete the circuit, iron ring may be placed in lining, okay, or it may be a graphite, means the charge, the container what we have, that may be lined with a graphite, that may be lined with a graphite, so that pinch effect can be reduced. That's the point you need to understand here. To complete it, we need to have some iron ring, or it may be a lining of a graphite on the container, so that the pinch effect can be reduced. So these are some of the drawbacks. It will increase the cost, right? So because of these drawbacks, disadvantages, such furnaces are not suitable for intermittent operations. Intermittent operation is nothing but in between, means we operate it for fraction of minutes, again we stop it, again we on it. So turning on and off, on and off, on and off. This is called intermittent operations. So in between we'll on it and again we'll stop it. So this is not possible because it takes some time to heat up, so there will be losses. So this cannot be used for an intermittent operation system. These are the disadvantages. Now let's move on for the another type of a induction furnace, that is a vertical core type induction furnace. This is the second type of an furnace in core type induction furnace. So let's have in detail about this. This type of induction furnace is the improved version over the direct core type. So whatever the direct core type we had discussed in the previous slide, it is the better version of that. It's an improved version. It is also known as Ajax Watt vertical core type induction furnace. Ajax Watt is a name who invented it, so it can also be called on behalf of him. Ajax Watt vertical core type. It is, you can have a picture like this. So you can understand here, this is a outer body. It is made up of a fire bricks and a bricks, so that it can also withstand the heat developed here and protect the system. We need to understand where the primary and secondary part we have here. This is primary winding, this is the primary winding, and we have the secondary charge channel here, secondary channel. This is the secondary channel through which this charge is made to flow. This charge will be given here, and we have very narrow shape of secondary channel, so that you can understand that we can have very less amount of charge to maintain the short circuit at the secondary side or continuity in the secondary side. This is the core, this is center of the core, this is outer core, and this is the primary. Primary supply will be given to this. This is the refractory material, refractory lining, which is used to just reverse the heat to the center of the core, right? So let's have some details about this. It is in vertical channel instead of horizontal compared to direct core type. Direct core type was horizontal, but here the charge is placed vertically, so it can be called as a vertical channel. It has vertical channel instead of horizontal channel. And one more thing is, the secondary and primary are closer to each other, so magnetical couple is also good. So because of the good magnetical coupling, it is going to have the very better or a high power factor compared to the direct core type. So magnetic coupling and power factor are comparatively higher. This furnace can be operated for normal frequency, means up to 50 Hertz. Okay. And also the molten or the metal which is to be circulated, it will be circulated in the V portion, as I shown here, as I told here. In this V portion the charge has to circulate, and as it is narrow, the small quantity of charge is sufficient to keep the secondary circuit closed. And also here the secondary circuit, the tendency of the secondary circuit to rupture due to pinch effect is counteracted by the weight of the charge in the crucible. So there is no chance of having a pinch effect in this kind of a system. So that is an advantage. The reflecting materials or the lining, inner lining materials are totally depends upon the type of charge. So what are the lining we are using? The material used for lining, it depends upon what type of charge we are using there. So if it is of a yellow brass, then we use clear lining. If it is of a red brass and a bronze, then we use the alloy of magnesia and alumina. So by this, I think you got an idea that we use this kind of a vertical core type induction furnace for melting of charge. So whenever we melt the charge, we should get it out. We should take out that molten metal, right? Molten metal has to be taken. So arrangement has to be made for that. The furnace can be rocked by suitable hydraulic arrangement for taking out the molten charge. So we can just have a hydraulic arrangement to take out that molten out of it. So this type of furnace is used for melting and refining of brass and other non-ferrous metals, and also it is suitable for continuous operation, which was not there in the direct core type. So these are all the advantages of vertical core type of induction furnace. The major advantage is here the good power factor or high power factor. It is about 0.8 to 0.85, and efficiency will be up to 75%, about 75%. And the size means the design, it can be operated up to 60 to 300 kilowatt for single phase. The furnace can be designed to have the input capacity of 60 to 300 kilowatt electrical supply. So this is about the vertical core type induction furnace. Now let's move on for the last type of an induction furnaces in the core type, that is indirect core type furnaces. So indirect core type induction furnaces means, your name indicates that indirectly we have to heat the charge. We are heating the charge indirectly. So in previous two, that is the direct core type and vertical core type, the secondary was the charge, and that current was flowing through the secondary through the mutual induction effect. So there was a flow of current in the charge. But in this case, in indirect core type, the current will not flow through the charge, but there will be a primary and secondary. That is why it is called induction furnace. There will be a primary and secondary, but charge will not play as a secondary. So let's see then how it's going to work. So to understand that, I have mentioned few points here. So these points will be explained don't worry about this. These are just to make you can note it down, these points. The same thing I will explain with the help of the picture. So let's look into that. So here this is the picture. So here we can observe there is a primary winding, this is the primary portion, and this is the secondary winding, right? So you can say that a suitable element is heated in the induction which transfers, means secondary will be a suitable element. The secondary will not be a charge. This is not a charge. Secondary will be just a suitable element which will be current will be flowing through the secondary, and it will be heated up. That transfers the heat to the charge by radiation. So we place the charge on this L and M. So we can say here we have some L and M here shape, right? So this consists of this L and M. This consists of a charge where the charge has to get heated up, but current is not flowing through the charge. Current is given to primary, and through primary we get current in secondary, and this will be charge. So secondary will get heated up, and that heat will be transferred to charge through radiation only, right? It is not in direct contact. That is why it is called indirect core induction furnace, right? So now let's see what are some of the important points of which we need to understand regarding this. Okay, so it consists of an iron core. We will have an iron core here, right? We will have an iron core. So that iron core which links the primary and secondary, that is a link between the primary and secondary in the circuit. The secondary circuit, it consists of a metal container. Secondary circuit consists of a metal container forming the walls of the furnace. So this metal container will form the walls. So if we have a metal container, then the heat can be transferred easily, right? When the primary winding is connected to supply, eddy currents are flow. As we know that based on the mutual induction effect, current will flow through the secondary, right? Then due to the eddy current, the container will also get heated up. The heat of the metal container is transferred to the charge. So when this secondary winding heated up, the secondary winding is nothing but it is a container. It's a metal container, and this metal container will get heated up, and that will be transferred to the charge through radiation. That will be transferred to charge which is placed in between. Through radiation we can transfer the heat. The furnace consists of LM, part LM. It's made up of a special alloy. This LM is made up of a special alloy which forms a part of magnetic circuit, right? This is going to form a magnetic circuit, right? And there is a provision that we can remove this magnetic circuit. We can take this LM out of it, and we can place another magnetic element over there. So by doing this, what we can get is we can operate it for different temperatures. We can remove this and we can insert another element over there, so that which can withstand the higher temperature. So that is why you can look into these slides now. This heat is transferred to the voltage by radiation, and it can be used up to 400 to 1000 degrees Celsius. So this change of degree temperature can be done by just removing that LM, that plate metal. So we can have magnetic material out of it. We can remove that magnetic material and we can place another magnetic material on which we can have a charge. So this is the advantage we have. Means there is we can say that one advantage what we have here is the temperature can be controlled without any external equipment, without any external arrangement. But one drawback what we have here is power factor again. It's a poor power factor because radiation is used in between to transfer the heat. So power factor between primary and secondary will be poor because a iron core is used here. Right, so the temperature can be controlled without the use of external equipment. 400 degrees Celsius means you need to have the magnetic material relevant to that. If you want more than that, you can change it, you can take it out and you can have another element in place of that LM. So this is the concept of indirect core induction furnace. I hope this is clear for you. If these concepts are clear, just like the video and share among your friends, and don't forget to subscribe here. In next videos we will just discuss about the another type of second type of induction furnace, that is coreless type of induction furnace or high frequency induction furnace. Thank you.